Why don't you sit closer to the podium since it'll be.
Welcome to the Betsy and Walter Stern Policy Center here at the Hudson Institute for another in our series of ambassador conversations with Walter Russell Mead. I am John Walters, Chief Operating Officer of Hudson Institute, and today we are delighted to be joined by Ambassador Cho of the Republic of Korea. As you know, Korea is not only a longtime ally of the United States, but also on the front line facing one of the most dangerous and brutal regimes, a regime that is both producing weapons of mass destruction and the means of delivering them across wide parts of the earth. Today, we have an important opportunity to learn about the status of the many concerns, security, economic, and others that America shares with the Republic of Korea. Ambassador Cho became the Republic of Korea's ambassador to the United States in 2017. Previously, he was President Moon's special envoy to the European Union and Germany, and a key advisor on foreign relations and security issues for President Moon's election campaign. Between 2003 and 2008, he served as Republic of Korea's ambassador to the United Kingdom. He's also a member of the emeritus faculty at Songgung University's Graduate School in International Studies, and he received his PhD in economics from Stanford University. Walter Russell Mead, my colleague here, is Ravenel B. Curry, the third Distinguished Fellow in Strategy and Statesmanship. He is also Global View columnist for the Wall Street Journal, and James Clark Chance, Professor of Foreign Affairs and Humanities at Bard College in New York. He was also Henry A. Kissinger Senior Fellow in U.S. Foreign Policy at the Council on Foreign Relations before joining Hudson. He's authored numerous books, including the widely praised Special Providence American Foreign Policy and How It Changed the World. And his next book is entitled The Ark of the Covenant, the United States, Israel, and the Fate of the Jewish People. We're going to begin with some remarks from Ambassador Cho. I want to again welcome him, and please join me in welcoming him to the podium. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Walters, for a very kind introduction. Mr. Walter Mead, distinguished guest, Happy New Year. According to East Asian Zodiac, this year, 2019, is the year of a pig, which is a symbol of fortune and wealth. So in that spirit, I hope that the new year will bring you all the fortune and the wealth starting from this month. My special thanks goes to the Hudson Institute for providing this meaningful forum. Before my conversation with Mr. Mead, I would like to first share my thoughts on today's theme, opportunities and challenges for U.S. Korean relations. So let me start with an overview of how far we have come. Last year, Seoul and Washington celebrated the 65th anniversary of our alliance. While some of us may hope to retire at 65, our alliance continues to grow stronger, deeper, and broader. Formed in the crucibles of Korean War, Korean and American soldiers have fought side by side in every major conflict since Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, for instance. And through the years, our alliance has been the backbone of peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula and throughout Northeast Asia. And today, the robust defense posture maintained by the dedicated men and women of our countries provides the crucial foundation for our ongoing diplomatic efforts with North Korea, efforts that could fundamentally change the region's security environment. Economically, Korea was able to rebuild itself from the ashes of the devastating war with the U.S. economic assistance and support. Now we are the 11th largest economy and one of the 7 countries in the world whose population is larger than 50 million and the per capita income is higher than $30,000. Our 2 countries also enjoy vibrant and mutually beneficial trade relations. Korea is America's 6th largest trade partner, ranked higher than the United Kingdom, France, and India. And America is the top destination for our foreign direct investment. All major Korean companies, including Samsung, Hyundai, Kia, LG, SK, have a big investment in various states in this country. Last year, our countries successfully amended Korea-U.S. FTA, which we hope will further deepen our economic ties and allow our people to prosper even more. From advancing mutual security and free trade to countering a variety of global challenges, including cyber threats, violent extremism, religious freedom, and others, Korea and the United States have worked together to make sure that the alliance serves both nations to the fullest. This ability to adapt to a constantly changing environment helps explain why our alliance has endured for so many years. But there are 2 other factors that explain why it is so resilient and has not just endured, but thrived. First is our shared values. Even though we live an ocean apart and have different cultural and historical backgrounds, Korea and the United States share a deep commitment to our fundamental values, including liberal democracy and free market economy. As we have tried to strengthen our democracy, we have done so with the support of the United States. The 2016 candlelight demonstrations that led to a peaceful political transition demonstrate the success of our efforts of which all Koreans are deeply proud. The second reason is our deep people-to-people ties. Korea sends the 3rd largest number of university students to the United States. That's the largest number in per capita. More than 2.3 million other Koreans visit the United States annually, while nearly 1 million Americans visit Korea each year. The Korean American community has more than 2.5 million members. As one of the largest and the most vibrant immigrant communities in the States, it continues to grow, adding to the millions of points of relationship between the people of our countries. Based on this foundation and confidence in our partnership, Seoul and Washington will continue to advance side by side, as we always have done. But I would like to talk about one topic in particular that presents us with the greatest opportunities and challenges for the future. That is, engaging with North Korea. 2018 was, in every sense of the word, historic. Just the year before, North Korea was conducting numerous missiles and nuclear tests. Threats and harsh rhetoric were exchanged, and there was talk of military options. Many in Seoul and Washington feared we were heading towards another conflict on the Korean Peninsula, one that could well escalate into nuclear war. But with strong determination, President Moon in my country, President Trump here in the U.S., and the Chairman Kim in North Korea dramatically changed this trajectory by choosing to test the diplomacy before everything else. Through 3 inter-Korean summits and the first ever U.S. North Korean summit in June, the 3 leaders confirmed their shared goal of complete denuclearization and permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula. Indeed, North Korea has not launched a single missile in 2018 and has taken other meaningful steps, including shutting down a nuclear test site, as well as a missile engine test facility. Yes, since the Singapore summit meeting, the pace of denuclearization talks has slowed somewhat. And I hear concerns about the reports on continued activities in North Korea, North Korea's nuclear production sites. But our shared goals have been reaffirmed and renewed. Our leaders remain determined and engaged. We have a year of diplomacy behind us and most certainly ahead of us. This is an unprecedented window of opportunity to establish new relations with North Korea and true peace on the peninsula. It is an opportunity we must seize. Building on the achievement of last year, Seoul and Washington will work toward removing the last piece of Cold War legacy and open a new chapter in the history of our alliance. What we are trying to achieve, however, is not something that can be done overnight. It will be a long journey that may take years to get to the final destination. So the most important thing is for our 2 countries to maintain close coordination and keep a united front throughout the process. It would be great if, in the new year, talks between Washington and Pyongyang could quickly gain traction and make concrete progress towards denuclearization. With the upcoming second Trump-Kim summit, I'm quite hopeful. The inter-Korean peace process can facilitate these talks and create trust that can make Pyongyang feel more secure and comfortable to take the next step toward denuclearization. This has been part of Seoul's focus when pursuing inter-Korean cooperation over the past year, letting Pyongyang see what is possible and demonstrating what benefits keeping our word can bring. I understand that there are concerns that North Korea is trying to drive a wedge between South Korea and the U.S. or exploit a so-called gap. But the alliance, as you know, has proven its strengths and the maturity over the years. We may sometimes have different views and different approaches to the problems, but through constructive and close consultation, we have always sought the best approach for the alliance. I'm sure even Pyongyang would not expect any less. On the New Year's Eve, the eyes of Korea watchers were on one man. You may have seen or read Chairman Kim's New Year speech. I was encouraged by 3 things in particular. First, Chairman Kim himself reconfirmed his own will to establish a new U.S.-North Korean relationship, build a lasting peace regime, and advance towards complete denuclearization. Second, Chairman Kim reaffirmed his willingness to meet President Trump anytime and pledged to work towards results which can be welcomed by the international community. Third, Chairman Kim declared his continued focus on economic development, which in my opinion is the main driver behind Pyongyang's strategic decision to come to the negotiating table. The train is already on the move, and North Korean leader has just made clear that he wants to stay on track. So that is where we begin the new year. Years from now, when we look back at this moment, will we call it the beginning of a new era or another failed attempt? I think 2019 will be more important than 2018 in determining that. It may test our patience and our ability to stand strong. But as long as we keep our faith in diplomacy and maintain rock-solid coordination between Seoul and Washington, I believe we will be able to make more and bigger steps toward. So I begin the new year with hope. Not just hope, but with renewed resolve to further build on what Korea and our partners in Washington have achieved together. I look forward to your continued interest in and support for ROK-U.S. joint endeavors to bring lasting peace to the Korean Peninsula. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. I'm glad that many people in the room now have had the opportunity I've had to hear you and to appreciate the wisdom and the balance that you bring to so many issues. I should say just a little bit before I ask some questions about this Ambassador series, of which this event is part. We have in Washington one of the most phenomenal and I think underappreciated resources in our diplomatic corps. Countries from all over the world send highly skilled and seasoned observers like Ambassador Cho, who often are in close personal contact with the leaders of those countries, who are seasoned international civil servants like Ambassador Cho, but also very much involved in understanding the political currents at home and in Washington. In Washington, ambassadors, and especially of close allies like Korea, have the opportunity to engage with Americans in both parties, in the executive branch, in the legislative branch, with the media. They engage not only in the sort of standard business of countries of security and trade, but they're involved in cultural diplomacy, in sort of building bridges between societies. So these are some of the most extraordinary people that we have in Washington. And I have to say, on the basis of personal experience, Ambassador Cho is really one of the best of the best. And I'm very honored to welcome him to Hudson today. For Hudson, this Ambassador Series is part of one of the ways we express our core belief that alliances are fundamental to American security and American prosperity. That's always been a key standpoint here at Hudson. And we try not only to analyze and reflect on these alliances, but to do what we can as an NGO, as a think tank, to try to strengthen them. So this is what we are trying to do here this morning. Now, before we get onto the standard foreign policy questions about South Korea, it does seem to me, Ambassador, that one of the things that sometimes distorts the perception of Korea outside is that people only think of it in terms of the security issues. North Korea, China, Japan, and so on and so forth. And people sometimes forget that Korea is a dynamic, changing society. You mentioned, you were a little too modest, I thought, in your remarks. Korea may be the most successful country in the world by some standards. If you think, where was it in 1953 at the end of the Korean War? The country was physically destroyed. People were literally starving in Korea, had a hostile enemy nearby. It was in a region that was historically underdeveloped. A series of terrible conflicts had broken apart economic and cultural ties going back centuries. And on this foundation, Korea has built not only one of the most economically prosperous, but one of the most democratically successful countries in the history of the world. I think we have to start from there when we appreciate just what kind of a place this is. And yet, while Koreans are extremely successful, they don't always seem happy to me as I look at Korean politics. And I wonder if you would give us a sense of, I know the president has introduced and the ruling party have introduced some major economic reforms and changes, and there seems to be a lot of, reaction to those. What should we know about the situation in South Korea?
Current situation. Well, I agree with you, Mr. Mead, that whenever I meet people here, they ask me about North Korean nuclear issue. And I believe we have much more to offer to our friends here than North Korean nuclear issues. As you said, I think Koreans' post-war development experience can have a unique place in the world economic development history. As you said, that in 1950s, we were one of the poorest countries. But if we see our history, actually Korea is a country which has very long history as China, dates back more than 4,000 years. Even the written history dates back nearly 2,000 years. And over the years, Korea respected the scholarly achievement and academic institutions. And through the histories, we developed reasonably good institutions, political institutions, economic institutions, and others. But 1953, for instance, Korea was completely devastated by the war. And also the traditional societies and the class had been always completely collapsed during the period of Japanese occupation. So we started in very low base, but our human resource was reasonably good. So that's one of the key reasons why we could catch up very quickly in every aspect, in the political democracy and the industrial strengths. But I would like to say that the Korea-U.S. alliance has been the backbone for, to allow us to pursue our economic growth, industrialization, and political democracy. Without alliance, it may have been hard to achieve the stability in the peninsula. And without stability, we all know that prosperity can hardly be achieved. So in that regard, I think U.S.-Korea alliance has been playing a key role in our endeavor to achieve prosperous economy and political democracy. Why Koreans are so unhappy? I don't know. I'm happy, man. I think that also has been one of the factors for Koreans to always try hard and work hard, because we've never been complacent of where we are. So Koreans always try to seek the improvement and betterment of our life. Sometimes we may be too fierce in criticizing ourselves and our opponents politically, but I think that also became a stimulus for our additional and extra efforts to achieve a better life.
I think that's right. Certainly one thing one notices as a foreigner visiting Korea, and if any of you haven't, I hope you have the chance soon, is people can be very contentious. If they disagree with you, they will tell you in Korea. They won't sort of politely, but they will let you know what they think. But you have a society that's both very contentious and in some ways divided, but a very strong sense of common Korean identity and destiny. And that may be one of the secrets of Korean success, is the dissension and the unity.
Right, right. I mean, during the post-war time, actually many developing countries in the third world tried to achieve rapid industrialization and economic growth. But they were constrained and drained by many issues, including ethnic problems and other, religion problems. Korea was free from such problems. That also was, I guess, one of the factors. We were one nation, as I said, more than thousands of years. So we had a strong identity in culture and tradition, values. So that also, I agree with your point.
Well, it does seem, though, that Koreans have one thing in common with Japan, which is they aren't making many baby Koreans anymore, or at least the birth rate, I think, is what, 0.95 or something now. It's very low.
Right.
And the government has just introduced a range of measures to try to raise the birth rate. Why is the birth rate so low in Korea, do you think, other than the obvious?
You are right. We are, at this point, perhaps the country which has the lowest fertility rate in the world. Now, for the replacement, to maintain the current population, you should have a fertility rate of at least 2.1. But our fertility rate has even went down below 1 last year. I'm also worried deeply because that reflects how young people sees the future of their life. And in that regard, I have a deep concern. I guess this declining fertility rate is a global phenomenon and everywhere, and especially Asian region, Japan. If we compare the demographic composition of Korea with Japan, actually we see that Korea is followed the steps of Japan with about 20 years lag. And I guess to some extent it's a global phenomenon reflecting global tradition, culture, but also in for specific Korean domestic region. I guess one of the key reasons the marriage age is now getting late and late. And now, when I was a college student, most women got married at 24, 5, and men got married about 28, 9. Now, it has been extended more than 10 years. So that is one of the reasons. So the fertility period of women are now shortened. It's one of the reasons. And another reason may be the real property price is so high, so it would be hard for young couples to afford housings without the assistance of their parents. That's another reason. And also, I don't know, many other reasons. Now, in my generation, marriage was a must, but young people may have a different view of life. But it's really worrisome because after all, the economic growth rate is driven by the increase in the labor force and the working force participation. So that will raise many, I think, problems in our society in the future. We are already entering, from last year, our working force has been shrinking. And our economic growth rate, in 1970s, we had more than two-digit level growth rate. Now, last year, our growth rate is estimated to be even lower than the rate of United States. That reflect the rapid demographic change. That's really, learning from the Japanese experience, it affects every aspects of life, including productivity and the housing problems, consumptions, patterns. So that's the big challenge we are facing.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you didn't blame either the Korean women or the men for this. And I think that's the kind of civilizational problem none of us should forget as we concentrate on some of the diplomatic and the sort of news of the day. Sometimes the biggest news is not making headlines, but it's in the background. So now we'll get to the business of our conversation. The diplomatic and security situation around South Korea. And I think it might be helpful for the audience if you could give us a few words about how does the world look from South Korea? As you have China, you have Japan, you have North Korea. At a distance, you have the United States. All of these countries themselves are in a process of change. The Korean relationship with each of them is quite complex. Is Korea today feeling threatened by all the changes that are taking place in the external environment, rise of China, changes in the U.S. and so on, or do you feel that these are moving in fundamentally a positive direction?
It all depends on how we do. I believe that I think now the world itself is in the time of a great transition. This technology-wise and political and economic weight-wise, now we are facing a time of a great transition. Throughout the Korean history, Korea is a peninsula attached to the continent. And we learned through our history that when there is a transition of power, Korea became the first victim of a test of this transition. Sometimes we became the place of conflict of big powers, even recently. So we are very alert at this time of a great transition. And as I said, it most depends. Sometimes, there are things that is beyond our control, but it also depends a lot on how well we are prepared to take this challenge. And it provides opportunities as well as challenges. And right now, this time of transition is same. Now China's rapid growth provides a big opportunity for Korean industry because it provides a big market. At the same time, it threatens the competitiveness of many well-established Korean companies. And also the increasing, I should say, competition between the United States and China in economic area as well as in global military and political areas puts a lot of challenges on Korea, and as we have experienced recently. So I think one of the, at this point, one of the key areas we have to emphasize in my country is our diplomatic capabilities to deal with these increasing challenges. And also first we would like to, as I said, in many regards, our diplomatic space and capability was limited by the problem of North Korean issues. So we hope we would be able to successfully deal with this last remaining piece of Cold War legacy in Korean Peninsula. That's, I mean, for the time being, our most immediate concerns and our goals to deal with in that connection.
I think one thing that sometimes puzzles Americans and maybe others about Korean sort of diplomacy or international posture is the sort of continuing tension between Korea and Japan. Certainly there are many countries, you know, the Second World War and the colonial era have left bitterness in many places in the world. But in most cases, this seems to be, as time passes, it seems to fade as an issue. But somehow in Korean-Japanese relations, the past is very present.
Yes, it still is. We had some unfortunate time of history in the past. Japan and Korea, and also China and Korea are the closest neighbors. And neighbors is always good aspect and bad aspect. Mm-hmm. And especially over the last one, I mean, the 19th century and the early 20th centuries, Korea and Japan had a very unfortunate history. And there still works, as you said, the bitterness of the feelings of Koreans, because we were occupied and ruled by Japan for 5 years. And actually that legacy still is in Korea. You know, when Germany lost the war in Second World War to Allied forces, it was Germany that was divided between West and East. But when Japan lost the war to Allied forces, it was Korea that was divided between South and North. And we still suffer from that legacies. And that, I mean, that is deeply rooted in public sentiment of Korean people. And so I think between Korea and Japan, things that can easily be discussed and resolved in other places sometimes become an acute issues of debate and conflict. And I think not any country can be free from historical experience. So we are still, I think, facing that problems due to our historical experience. But my government position is that now history is a history. History is, I mean, we should learn from history, both positive and negative lessons. But history should not be the subject of government's negotiation or agreements. That's one thing. And the other side is we should, look for the forward-looking relations with Japan, because Japan is our closest neighbor, and it will be forever the closest neighbor of Korea. And we share the value of liberal democracy, free market economy, and also we both are strongest ally to the United States. So we should improve our relations with Japan. That's my government position now. And actually, despite many debates between the two countries, the people between the two countries exchanges and cooperation is ever increasing in economic area and cultural area. So in the private sector, actually the close relationship between the two countries has been ever increasing over the past decades.
Do you think that having an emperor in Japan who is one further step away from the war can help to create a distance or create a better climate for reviewing Japan, or is that really not a factor for the Koreans?
I think it could help because I don't know how should I call him, this new emperor to be in May. He's young, post-war young generation.
Yes.
And his image has not linked to Second World War or Japanese occupation in Korea. So I think that will be help.
Something positive. Good.
Yes.
People also are constantly asking, is Korea going to align with China? You know, you hear it in Japan, you hear it sometimes in the United States. Is that a possibility for Korea, and why, if not, why not? And where are Korean-Chinese relations headed, do you think?
I don't know what you mean by aligned.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure the people who ask the question know what they mean, but it's certainly, if you're in this business, it's one of the speculations that you often hear.
You know, Korea's history has the most intimate relationship with China throughout the centuries. We imported a lot from China. It's, technologies, institutions, culture, and academic achievement. So, and also we always share the border with China. And perhaps I might not be modest, but perhaps if there are one nation who understands best about China, I may say it may be Korea. Throughout our historical exchanges and also the intimacy of the traditional values, Confucianism and things like that. But at the same time, Korea, there always had a tension between Korea and China in the past. As you have seen that many countries close to current Chinese regions, in the peripheral regions, ultimately absorbed into Great China. But few still remains. I guess Korea and Vietnam maintained its independence throughout, centuries. And that, to some extent, says the relation between China and Korea. China's rapid rise, as you mentioned, puts a lot of challenges and also opportunities to Korea, economically and also politically. And we had many conflicts with China in the past, but China is our neighbor who are so important for the future destiny of Korea. So we have to build up a very good and cooperative relationship with China. That's what our country is trying to do.
All right. Well, I have monopolized your time so far. but I think we have some time now for members of the audience to ask questions. Let me remind you all that a question is a short phrase that would be, if written down, would be punctuated by a question mark at the end. It's not a debating thing, it's a question. And let me ask you to give your name and your affiliation so that people know what you're doing here. Yes, in the front? You? Yes? Yes, it's coming down to you.
Hi there. Thank you. Sean Lingus with a publication called Cyberscoop. Ambassador, thanks for being here. A question for you. You mentioned in passing the cyber threat, shared interest in cybersecurity between the two countries. Wanted to ask you about the recent reported data breach on defectors from North Korea targeting the Ministry of Unification or an agency that works with it. I'm wondering how serious a threat like that is to North-South relations in cyberspace. What measures South Korea can implement to better defend against that kind of threat? And if that's a red line in terms of North Korea's cyber activity, it's well documented the types of cyber activity that they've conducted against South Korean banks and other entities. I'm wondering if the defectors issue is particularly sensitive for you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think that is very important issues, but frankly, I'm not very well aware of what's going on in that area. And I understand that North Korea is very strong cyber capacity, and they have trained talent for that specific purpose. And that I understand that puts a threat on the security issues. But I do not know how serious it is. All I know is from time to time we are alerted by their threat. And I guess there was several occasions when they tried to hacking our institutions, the computer centers. But I'm sorry, I am not quite well informed about that issue.
Yes, ma'am. Here in the middle here. He's bringing a mic.
Thank you for being here today. My name is Isabelle Hoagland. I'm with Inside U.S. Trade. Is South Korea preparing a challenge of sorts in case the U.S. decides to impose trade restrictions on Korean autos and auto parts? And do you think the revised U.S.-Korea trade deal will provide Seoul with protection from potential Section 232 restrictions?
That's a very good question. Actually, we successfully amended Korea-U.S. FTA last year, and our National Assembly, our Congress ratified it. So from this month, the amended new KORUS FTA is effective. Now, the main component of the amendment of KORUS FTA last year was the auto sector. And we were happy with the previous FTA, but the U.S. strongly demanded the amendment, and we accommodated a lot of demand from the U.S. side. And the key part of that was the automobile part. We further postponed the tariff, zero tariff concession by U.S., I guess extended nearly 30 years. And also we never allowed the exemption of a Korean standard to any other country's car, including all European cars and the Japanese cars. We insisted the Korean standard, but we allowed some exemption of American manufacturers. Now, the number of that exemption of car has been doubled. So actually the main component of the amendment of KORUS FTA was on the automobile sector. Now, last year we heard that this Section 232 for security division on automobile. And to be frank, we don't think it makes much sense if it's applied to Korea, because we accommodated most of the demand of U.S. side on automobile sector. And we, even though there was some domestic resistance, we thought as a strong ally, we have to accommodate some of the U.S. demand, and we did it, and we persuaded politicians in National Assembly. Now we are facing rather this problem of Section 232. We are monitoring closely how it develops. I guess Department of Commerce has to submit its report by February 17th, and then President Trump has 3 months to decide upon this report. We hope Korea would not be, subject to that Section 232. Lest the argument whether this Section 232 would be really, how should I say that, justified for the future of U.S. economy or global economy. And we think that Korea should not be subject to this 232.
Okay. Yes, in the back, yeah. You, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador. Mike Pellington with Executive Intelligence Review and Schiller Institute. I think the potential for this tremendous breakthrough in Korea can be credited to some extent to the fact that the United States and China and Russia and Japan and South Korea were all effectively working together towards a common goal. And even though there's a lot of anti-China and anti-Russia sentiment, even hysteria here, Trump is committed to being friends with Russia and being friends with China. And I'm wondering to what extent you think your diplomacy in Korea and the model of what's happened in Korea, the Singapore model and the model of Moon and Kim working together, can affect a broader global cooperation between the major powers rather than the descent into war and confrontation.
Thank you, Mr. Pellington, for the question. I understand you have worked long on this very important and fundamental issues of governance and the development. Now I think I said that we are in the time of great transition, and great transition in many respects. The state governance system, the competition of a state governance system, and also economic, free market economic system. I cannot predict the future of it, but one thing I may say is based on our own experience, Korea's economic development in early stage was state-led economic growth under very strong government leadership and government partnership with private companies and industries. And it was very successful. But we also found it was not quite sustainable. By the time we reached some stage of development, say in late 1980s, we thought that that model no longer help us to elevate further our economic standing. So we changed. We changed in 1990s of our model. I read a couple days ago the Martin Wolf's column in Financial Times about I don't remember the title of that title of that column. That I kind of agree with him that that ultimately relying on individuals' interest and how should I say that, dream and motivation to achieve himself and realize his or her potential in their life is the most effective way of making advance of human life. And to that extent, I think Korea had big challenges in making transition of that in 1990s. Also, I guess to some extent, Japan had faced big challenges in making transition of that. And I also think that China would not be free from facing that challenge at some point. And perhaps it's already is facing that challenges to further elevate people's living standard and its economic efficiency. Now, also everywhere in the world, perhaps not everywhere, liberal democracy is challenged, whether that is the most effective system to advance its people's standard of life. I think this debate will go on for a while, but as Winston Churchill said once, that I personally believe that democracy is the worst system except all the previous system we have in the human life. Democracy is not a perfect system. We face many problems, especially one of the big problems is nobody is represented. I mean, future generation is not represented in the democratic decision-making process. And it tends to be that the time horizon of a decision in the democratic system tend to be shorter. So that is the, I guess, weakness of, especially, I mean, this time of the global circumstance and communities. I mean, where the peoples are affected directly, not the filtered opinions, but directly through SNS, various unfiltered opinions. I guess democratic political system would continue to face challenges. But personally, I don't see any better alternative. And the question is how we make it more effective and more forward-looking, and also make how the decision made in our democratic system would be more long-time or long-term vision-based. This, I guess, is the challenge we are facing now.
We are about out of time, but let me just ask you one question that I think is on a lot of people's minds, which is, do you think there'll be another summit between Chairman Kim and President Trump? And if so, is that likely to be sooner or at some distance in the future?
I think so. I think it will take place because both President Trump and Chairman Kim wants it. And Chairman Kim made it clear in his New Year address, and President Trump has repeatedly said that he wants a summit meeting. In my view, as I said, the train is already on the move, and no one wants to jump off the train. Now the question is how quickly and how fast and how far the train can move. But I don't think it will be stopped or reversed, at least in the near future, or at least if something happens which is unexpected at this point. So I think once we are on the train and the train is on the move, we have to make a theater and we have to make some progress, and nobody wants the reversal of that. So I expect the second summit meeting between Mr. Trump and Chairman Kim will take place. When? I do not know. But I guess the communication is going on now. And the visit of Chairman Kim to China this week is, I think, quite a good sign for that. So I look forward to the second summit meeting taking place.
Well, thank you very much, and we hope to have you back here again soon.
Thank you very much.